Welcome to Hockey Night in Vegas, episode 54. It's hockey season, bitches. My name is Eddie Rivkin. I'm joined by Chris Chapman of Fox Sports Las Vegas and Lindsey Brown of Lotus Broadcasting. This is the incredible threesome that's going to bring you all the Golden Knights information all the way through till we'll get to the predictions at the end. You know, there's that Christmas carol and it says it's the most wonderful time of the year and they're talking about Christmas, but you know what? It's high noon. It's September 21st. And it's the most wonderful time of the year because the Golden Knights are in training camp. I know there was rookie camp and there was draft and there was rookie tournament. Great hockey. The big boys are in camp. Preseason starts in about 3 days. The banner gets hung on October 10th. And the three of us are back to give you all of the Golden Knights hockey action with a little bit of humor, the occasional dirty joke, and trying to make Lindsey blush as frequently as possible. So with them starting off in camp, let's talk about camp battles. In the offseason, the Golden Knights traded Riley Smith for basically Ivan Barbashev, $5 million out, $5 million in, and they got 4 years younger and maybe a little bit more of a bite. Riley Smith will be missed. There certainly will be a tearjerker when he comes back to town with the Penguins sometime in January or February or when it is. But let me pose this to you, my two co-hosts and friends. Who do we think is going to replace Riley Smith on the line with William Karlsson?
Go ahead.
Somebody shoot.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if – I'll preface by saying that I feel like replacing Riley Smith, the player – is going to be something that's done by committee because I don't feel like you can replace his leadership, his ability to kill penalties, his moxie. You know, he's certainly a gritty type of player with a little finesse in his game, the confidence I feel that he brought to the line. And here's the other aspect that I don't know if we've even really considered, but for the first time in William Karlsson's career as a member of the Golden Knights, he's not going to have Riley Smith on his side. Obviously, due to injury or whatever, those two guys have not played together for every single game since the team has been around. But for a majority of William Karlsson's career as a member of the Golden Knights, Riley Smith has been on his wing. So replacing Riley is not something that's going to be easily done. If you ask me who will win the battle in camp to be on William Karlsson's wing, I think it's Max Comtois. Because I feel like there's a lot of high-end offensive skill with Max Comtois that you don't really have yet with Pavel Dorofeyev, Brendan Brisson, and Paul Cotter. Now, there's a lot of grit to Paul Cotter's game, but I feel like Comtois was a high draft pick, I think, in the 50s in 2017. I think he was a guy that the Golden Knights had their eye on in that draft. It didn't work out that he ended up in Vegas, but I feel like the organization has seen a lot of him when he was in the juniors in the Quebec Major Junior League.
How about when he lit the lamp like it was a campfire against the Golden Knights?
So like they know what they're getting with Max Comtois. Like I feel like he's a guy who they really like. The question is, can he commit to playing the 200-foot game that Bruce Cassidy demands? And that has become a staple of the William Karlsson line and the guy who's played alongside William Karlsson. We've gotten it from Michael Amadio, and we've seen the offensive uptick from Amadio. So I wonder if Comtois can commit to that. I think he's going to come into camp highly motivated for the first time in his career. He's going to be playing for a team that's a contender and not a team that's contender for the number 1 overall pick. I also feel like for whatever reason, he whether it's out in public or not, I feel like he's a guy who's kind of became a scapegoat for how bad the Ducks were, right? Like they didn't tender the guy a contract. Now you could say that, well, they just didn't tender him a contract, but he was a guy who was supposed to be part of their plans for the future. For whatever reason, they didn't tender him that contract. And the way I look at it, like, hey, you're the scapegoat for how bad we've been over the last few years. So I think he's going to come in highly motivated. I believe Max Comtois at the end of when we raise that banner here in Vegas, and you and I and Lindsey are sitting in the press box watching that banner raised, and they introduce the team, I truly believe Max Comtois is going to be in the starting lineup that night.
Paul Cotter plays 55 games, scores 14 goals, and you're going to tell me that he's going to start the season in Henderson?
No, I'm not saying that. I think he's going to start the season in the press box.
In the press box?
Yes.
Well, that's okay because he's pretty entertaining if they let us talk to him. But Lindsey?
Sorry about that. My phone overheated.
Okay.
Got to turn the AC on, sister.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So the question is, who's going to replace Riley Smith in the Golden Knights lineup on opening night?
Well, I heard you guys already kind of mentioning Paul Cotter, and he's certainly the leader in the clubhouse just based off of what I think he brings as a unique skill set. You talked about how Barbashev brings, a little more of the edge to this lineup. I think Paul Cotter, when he's running around at the right speed, he does the same thing. Like he's a guy that's willing to take on a role. He's also a shoot first mentality, which I think could do wonders on the power play option if they decide to go that way. This is where that committee thing comes into that Chapman kind of alluded to just a couple of minutes ago in terms of replacing Riley Smith, because I think you have more variety in what you could accomplish on the power play. Maybe they both don't look the same way, but I'm not sure if that's the direction this team wants to go, if they want more of a uniformity. But, Max Comtois being invited into camp, being a pretty successful player in the last couple of years now, is, as Kelly McCrimmon said just a few minutes ago in press availability, his career kind of petered out towards the end of his time at Anaheim, and they didn't offer him a qualifying contract. And so he's really motivated. He is very sticky. He can get in the middle of the ice. That's where I think whoever is going to replace this needs to have a premium at that particular skill set, because I love William Karlsson, but that's not where he usually operates, right? He likes to be along the boards. He'll be down low once in a while. But for the most part, it's kind of an open tryout for that spot. And so I guess that's what training camp is for. And you let these guys compete, and there's something to be said about making sure your young guys are in good positions to develop. And sometimes the best place for that isn't in the press box up with the big club. And so whatever is best for Paul Cotter, I'm sure that this organization will keep that in mind as well.
Let me try this one on you. How about William Carrier, 15 goal scorer, moving up to the second line to play with William Karlsson, and Cotter playing on the fourth line with Nick Waugh?
I mean, I don't hate that, right, Chap? Like, we don't hate that, but I don't want to break up that fourth line.
Yeah,
like, it was so effective.
Like, I feel like they've got the best fourth line in hockey, right? Like, you've got so much production out of Nick Waugh and William Carrier, and we saw a lot of, I would say, a very distinct improvement in Keegan Colasar's game as the season went on.
Yes, a huge step.
Like, he was a guy who I think we all really like, and we root for him. And Keegan Colasar at the start of the playoffs was a much better player than Keegan Colasar at the start of the regular season. I don't think you want to break up that fourth line. As I said, it's the best fourth line in hockey. I mean, you're not going to find a lot of teams that have the skill set, and I think the production that you've gotten from that team. Nick Waugh is a guy who could play up and down the lineup. The fact that you've got him anchoring your fourth line really says a lot about the depth and the quality of this team and that fourth line. We all love William Carrier. I mean, career high last season in goals. He's a guy who Lindsey talked about playing a role. Like, William Carrier has been in that role. Like, I feel like if you move him off that fourth line, I feel like you're kind of asking him to change who he is as a player. And I don't know if you want that, because I feel like what you've got from William Carrier is exactly what this team needs on that fourth line.
You don't think that he could bring that exact same jam to playing with Karlsson?
I think he could. I mean, I don't see why he couldn't, but I don't know at what cost to the fourth line. Like, I feel like Cotter is a better fit on that second line. If you're going to if that's like the only thing you change, and if it's not Comtois, then yeah, I feel like Cotter is a much better fit playing alongside William Karlsson and Michael Amadio than he would be playing on the fourth line, because you're going to get more opportunity, I feel, with Cotter on the second line. So I feel like you want to get him on the ice more. So I don't, like Lindsey said, I don't hate the idea. I just don't know if it's a cost to the fourth line if you move Carrier up.
Well, and what's the true job of the fourth line, guys? Like, is it to go out there and score goals? I mean, it's a bonus. I'll take it. I'll take it a dominant presence in the offensive zone, but they're out there to be physical. And I think William Carrier is best when he's not the only bowling ball on the ice. And so I think he understands space really well. And you see that with really elite shooters. You see that with really elite goal scorers. You see that with people who know how to line up a hitter too. And that's what he does. He understands space. He understands gaps, and so he's able to find those little soft areas of ice when the opportunity presents itself with fourth line players, which are typically guys that are younger, still trying to cut their teeth in the league. They can be taken advantage of a little bit more. And so I guess it depends on like how toothy do you want that second line to be, because then I get it, like move Will Carrier up, and maybe it's like you move him up for a few shifts, then you move him back down. But Nick Waugh, I know for a fact, is a hell of a better hockey player as a centerman than he is a wing. And so I don't want to move him from where he is. I think he needs that little breathing room of the fourth line, because he's a good player, but he's not a great player. And that's fine, because we don't need everybody to be great players on this team. You need effective players on this team. And that's what that fourth line has proven. Your guys' scout of Keegan Colasar, I think, is spot on. I was hoping for 15 goals for him last year. I think I was a little bit generous with that, but I think he could challenge that this season. Now that they've had some time, as long as everybody stays healthy, because I mean, we saw so many bodies go in and out of that towards the end of the last season. They're going to have to play a lot of different roles with that line, because we got to remember a lot of these guys are dealing with heavier legs from last season, and not everybody's Nick Hague's age. And so I think they're going to be probably the roll with the punches people. And but the biggest Swiss Army knife I think that this team has right now is Paul Cotter. And so he's where I would slide him in first.
Well, isn't that kind of I would say that the heavier legs is actually a benefit for that fourth line, because those guys, obviously they didn't play as many minutes as like the top two lines, obviously, but being such a high quality fourth line and a group of players, Bruce Cassidy has the confidence that these guys could probably pick up the slack and play a few more minutes every night, just because they're so skilled and they're so good at what they do. So like, while heavier legs probably means a little bit less for the top guys, especially to start the season, but having so much faith and confidence in that fourth line. I mean, and the thing is, it wasn't even Bruce Cassidy. You go back to Pete DeBoer, you go back to Gerard Gallant. The fourth line for this team has always been a strength. And trusted. Yes, well trusted. Like Gallant would have the fourth line out there to close games. So it's a group that's always been a strength for this team. It's something that George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon have done a really good job of, making sure that fourth line is loaded. So you mentioned the heavy legs, but I feel like it's not really that detrimental to the team, because the fourth line is so well skilled and they're so good at what they do.
So I think we would probably be in agreement with the statement that Dorofeyev might be the best pure scorer of them, but he probably needs another year of seasoning to develop his 200-foot game, where he was enough of a value to Bruce Cassidy to break the lineup. Does that seem reasonable to both of you?
I think so.
Cassidy really likes Dorofeyev. Like when he talks about Dorofeyev, you could tell that he sees a really high ceiling for Dorofeyev. I wonder if maybe we're ignoring his opportunity to win that job in camp. Like we've talked about Comtois, we've talked about Paul Cotter. Dorofeyev maybe is the as you mentioned, the guy with the most skill out of the three of them. And I don't think we should sleep on him, because I feel like no matter who wins the job, and they certainly will win the job, it's not like, oh, well, this guy's the favorite in the clubhouse. No, I think that whoever wins that job is going to have earned it. And who knows, maybe it could even be Brendan Brisson. I don't think so. I feel like he's another guy.
Chap.
Brisson's shot.
Apparently the best, maybe the best in the organization for a one-timer.
From the dot on the power play, and just in general, I think of the four guys we've mentioned, he's probably the guy who maybe would be the best on the power play. So I don't want to sleep on him, but I don't think I think he's a guy, another year in Henderson for him. But Dorofeyev, I mentioned him on the show, on the VGK Insider Show, only because I couldn't pick Comtois because he had already been picked. But I feel like Dorofeyev, he's got a real sneaky good skill set, and he's got some speed. And now I mentioned this, and it was dismissed a little bit, but I feel like having another Russian in the lineup is beneficial to a kid like Dorofeyev, right? Because in this team's history, every Russian player they've ever had has been on an island by themselves. This team now has Dorofeyev, and let's not forget a defenseman who potentially could win a job coming out of camp in Daniil Miramanov.
He's out long-term, Kelly McCrimmon said, so he's not an option right now.
Well, I guess I should have shown up to camp this morning.
It's okay.
I would have known.
It's okay. I only heard this 20 minutes ago myself, and so.
But who's having Barbashev in the lineup, a guy who's now won 2 Stanley Cups? Is that going to help Dorofeyev maybe understand the role a little bit better? Having that connection and that familiarity with another Russian player who this team obviously has invested a lot in, I think that can only be a benefit to Pavel Dorofeyev, having that guy there.
I'm going to say that I hope not just for ceremony, but I think Cotter's going to definitely be in the lineup opening night for ceremony, because
he got his name on the cup. He got his name on the
cup. He played 55 games. He scored some big goals. He scored in Boston.
Early on, he scored some big goals.
So, so the dark horse is Brisson. The favorite is Chapman says Comtois. I'm going to go with Cotter. Lindsey, the favorite to win the spot on the wing is?
I think it's Cotter. But for the podcast sake, I'll bite a little bit on the Dorofeyev angle, especially with the fact that most of his success, I mean, limited as it was late last season, came on a line with William Karlsson. And so maybe there's a connection there, some familiarity there. I really like him, how he manages himself in tight. And I think that's an area of the ice that exactly. That's exactly what I'm getting at, that every NHL team should have a premium on guys like that. Cause it's like, that's where most of the goals are scored. It's in the dirty areas. And so I get how sparkly and dangly Brendan Brisson is. He's got a great shot. I don't think he's ready. I think he needs some more meat on those bones. I think he needs another year. He didn't dominate in the AHL last year. I don't think you can move up a level. I would say that to a 10-year-old. I would say that to a 14-year-old that I was coaching. If you can't dominate at the level you're at, you're not going to be ready for the next one. And I don't want to put him in a position where it's like, all right, Brendan, it's time to get used to the NHL. Also, that means power play time right away. Like, I want him to earn it the old fashioned way and to have some struggles, because I think that's what's going to shape his game better overall for himself personally and for this organization in the future. But hey, if he has a very specific answer to a very specific question that this organization has, maybe they do it because they get enough depth up and down the lineup to help manage that if things start to spin out a little bit.
How about the defense? There's nobody's going to really touch the top 6, but there might be a conversation for us to have about the 7 spot. Ben Hutton is the veteran. He's on a very, team-friendly contract. He's easily one of the most friendly and likable guys that we have the opportunity to talk to. but there are kids knocking on the door, Braden Pahal and others. Do you think that Ben Hutton holds on to the 7 spot, or do you think that it's time for one of the kids to push their way through? Lindsey?
I think you certainly start to look to defer to young talent. I think I would like to see a little more extended look at Caden Korzak and what he's able to bring. But what you can't teach sometimes is the ability to stay ready. And I really think when he came in a pinch last year and played those bunch of games after being up in the stands for so long, I that's so invaluable to not have a big blip and a big drop off. Now, when you have a deep, as a defensive core as you do here, you can kind of manage those younger guys a little bit better. You can put them out there on an island a little bit more and, mitigate the risks and stuff like that. But you have to start taking a look at that, because Alec Martinez is not 30 years old anymore, right? Like, Petro's here for a long time. Haig and White Cloud are here for a long time. We know about the formidability that Brady McNabb brings, and there's nobody in the organization that brings what he brings to the ice. And so if somebody's playing really well, I take a look at him for that 7th. But that's the hardest part of this lineup to crack, is the defense. And they're the ones that last the longest as well. And so I don't know how many people in the organization that they were like, they're top pair defensemen. They wouldn't be top pair defensemen in the NHL if they were to get brought up. But those are different responsibilities that get delegated to you when you do get moved up. And so you're not exactly in a position of comfort. Now it's your job to figure out a way to succeed. That's what professionals do. That's what the great ones do. But I would not want to be a defenseman in this organization right now if I was like under the age of 20, or if I was like my mid 20s. I'm like, that's not looking good for me.
Chap?
Well, I'll preface by saying they did sign Braden Pahal to a contract extension over the summer. So this is tough for me, because I really like Ben Hutton. Like, I think he's a great guy to chat with. He's funny. He's very personable, very friendly. That being said, I think if you can find a landing spot for him, I feel like maybe he's a guy that you attempt to move to another team. First of all, the way I would sell it is, you're good enough to play for a variety of teams in this league every night. You're good enough of a player. You've improved your stock enough over the last 2 seasons to where you can be a top 6 defenseman for a variety of teams in this league. You have an expiring deal. Let's see if we can find a place for you that you're going to play every night, and you can work on getting yourself your next contract, because truth be told, it's probably not going to be in Vegas, unless he's fine with being in the press box night in, night out. I don't know if that's something he wants. I don't know if that's something the organization wants. Here's the problem with that, and where I talk myself out of moving him. You bring up one of these young defensemen, Korzak, Pahal. There's no spot for them in the top 6.
Right.
So you don't want to have a Braden Pahal or a Caden Korzak sit in the press box every single night and watch the game. You want those guys playing night in, night out, which is why I don't think one of those young guys cracks the lineup. Look, truth, like Lindsey said, Alec Martinez, he also enters the last year of his deal. He's a guy I can't really get a read on whether or not he wants to, if he would be willing to come back for a reduced role and reduced salary. I don't know. He's a tough guy to read sometimes, but he's a very, very sarcastically funny guy. But that's not getting into the mind of what a player's thinking contract-wise. I don't know if he's going to be back next season. So do you want to start getting one of these young guys ready for next season when there potentially is a spot, right? Because next season you could potentially have a top 6 spot and the 7th spot, because Ben Hutton is on the last year of his deal as well. So there could potentially be 2 spots next year. So do you want to start getting one of these guys ready today? I feel the only way you do that is by playing them, and they're not going to play with the big club. So I feel like the 7th spot is securely Ben Hutton's spot, because I don't think they're going to bring up a Korzak. I don't think they're going to have Pahal sit in the press box and watch the game every night. I feel like Henderson is a good spot. and they want those guys playing.
I have a novel idea. The NBA made it very famous. I bet that they're going to do a little bit of load management this year. I bet that they're going to give Martinez some nights off, and they may give Petro some nights off. I think that they realize now how to get through the regular season and how to peak when the first game of the playoffs happens. And I think that there's an opportunity in those dog day road trips, like in New York in January, right before the All-Star game, and some of those other spots where there might be a chance to give those guys some cups of coffee during the year. I don't think it's wise, like you said. There's no reason to bring Braden Pahal up to the big club and have him sit for 20 games and then play for one. That's stupid. But if Martinez miraculously hurts his pinky toe and has to go out for 10 days and Pahal can get 3 or 4 games, or Korzak, I think that they are going to, with the very shortened summer, with the schedule the way it is, I think that they're going to be much, much more careful on how they manage their minutes this year. And I can see the kids coming up for little 3 and 4 game blocks throughout the season to give some guys some rest. And that's how they incorporate them to potentially evaluate. Like you said, there's likely going to be Martinez's spot coming up. Listen, he's got 3 cups. He's going to be 38. He's made a boatload of dough. I wouldn't be surprised if he said, "Hey, thanks."
Yeah, I actually agree with that 100%. I think this team is one thing about this organization. They are really good at finding ways to win games. Yeah, and and let's be honest, they've kind of forced a change now in the league in one season. The way they won the cup with the goalie situation.
We'll see.
Well, listen.
Well, that's our next topic, but let's finish up on the D-men.
They won the Stanley Cup. So I would not be shocked to see this team do exactly what you said. Hey, look, you know what? We've got a 5-game homestand. We're playing teams that we should beat. The other thing is there's not that big of a drop-off when you have a Hutton in there or Korzak and Pahal. I mean, Pahal played in a really big playoff game for this team. So they trust these guys. They have the confidence. They have the faith that they can step in and play that role. I think you're 100%. I think you're really onto something there, Eddie, with the load management. And hockey is not the NBA where these guys just don't want to play.
Right.
It's the organization doing what's right for the organization. And I really think that that's something that they're going to do. We're going to see it. Hey, we're like you mentioned, that New York road trip, Islanders, Devils, Rangers, and what was it? Pittsburgh. Detroit. So like
into the All-Star break.
Yeah. Here, Petro, you've got a week off coming up.
Go ahead to Cabo. Take the kids.
Days. Yep. Get in the Honda Pilot and road trip to Disneyland for an extra 3 or 4 days. Like it makes sense. And if there's an organization out there that's going to do it and make it work, it's this organization.
And having the new head coach of the Henderson Silver Knights, having all those years behind the bench with the big clubs, Ryan Craig.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to, with no disrespect to what they did with Manny before and stuff like that, but now they have a guy who was there with Gerard Gallant, was there with Pete DeBoer, was there with Coach Cassidy. It's ingrained now. So that guy who's now, we can safely say, on the fast track to an NHL head coaching job is going to do everything to cement that the systems are absolutely identical, so that those kids, when they do get the call to the big club, are rock solid with the systems and everything else like that. So I really like where they are defensively. Like you said, if you were 24, 25 years old, this is not the organization you want to, because the road is a long, long, long way to the big club. But let's talk about the net. Unless Aiden Hill is dead or loses a leg in a tragic accident, he's starting opening night.
Yep.
But let me ask you to this. Is he going to keep the net? Is it going to be 41-41? Is Logan Thompson going to steal the net? Or are they going to, or some other option? What are the Golden Knights, now that they've proven that you don't need to spend $18 trillion in net to win a Stanley Cup? What are the Golden Knights going to do in net this year after game one? Lindsey Brown, goaltender on record.
Yeah. Well, last year at this time, I'm basically going to use the same formula. It's just the names are in a different order. Where I think you give Adin Hill 2 games and then you give Logan Thompson 1, and you just keep that going. I don't know if it's ever 2 then 1 or if it's 1-1-1 or whatever. I don't know if they want to do it matchup wise. Like, Bruce Cassidy is a very highly intentional individual, and he told us last year, like, we have a plan for the goaltenders through the first couple of months, because they were feeling it out. They were still trying to see like who they had, who was going to step forward, who was going to compete. And I would be confused if there wasn't the similar approach this year, because Adin Hill won this team a Stanley Cup. He stepped into a big moment. But we know how this team plays in front, and you don't necessarily need that big time goalie all the time, especially when we're talking regular season. Like, you have to get back into this mode that this isn't playoffs anymore. It's not do or die. And so I would roll with Adin as long as he's the hot goaltender. And then it's a dumb thing and it's a simple answer, but it's the hot hand plays. And so if he starts to taper off a little bit, I have yet to see that consistency from him. I mean, we've seen goaltenders get hot in the playoffs and then not be able to recreate it again. I'm like, just look at what Jordan Binnington's going. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Jordan Binnington.
Cam Ward a decade ago in
Cam
Carolina. And so I want to be very careful with that. And you want to make sure, especially with the personnel that we know that Logan Thompson is, that he is engaged, he is engrossed, and that he's competing at his highest level. Because I feel like you have to manage that personality. Maybe he did some growing up over the summer. Who knows? Like, everybody has that summer in their 20s where it's just like, I feel like a new woman. But I'm not sure.
Hopefully LT didn't have that. But
it's okay. He can mature.
Just
he can mature. So we'll see. I think that's a point that doesn't always need to be the biggest point of emphasis, because that's why I really like your idea of load management with defensemen, because the burden of the game when you're in Bruce Cassidy's team falls on the defenseman, especially when you're in the D zone, right? You're playing a lot of hard minutes, you're grinding out, you're boxing out in front, you're taking cross checks to the chops. And so, they're both so different in the way that they play as well. They both play really deep, but Logan is just the athletic freak and Adin is a little bit more methodical. And so he definitely has the advantage there when it comes to Bruce Cassidy's system. But it's a good problem to have when you have 2 goaltenders that are both hungry, young, and ready to compete.
Go ahead, Chap, and then I'm going to throw the monkey wrench into the whole equation.
I do feel like it's Adin Hill's net. I don't think the split is 41-41. I think it's probably somewhere along the lines of 60%, 40%, maybe 55%, 45%. Look, these 2 guys are both going to play. That's something we know. The other thing is Logan Thompson is no longer on a 2-way contract. He's on a 1-way deal now. So he's either here or he's not. And the idea of him being sent down to Henderson is not something that can be entertained. Not that it would be, but I think there's questions, not so much I think with both guys. The question with Adin Hill is, as Lindsey kind of alluded to, can he be the goalie that we saw in the playoffs, in the Stanley Cup final, right? Like the story for him to win the Stanley Cup, like if anybody would have said to me in March that this team was going to win the Stanley Cup and Adin Hill was going to be the guy in net, I don't know if I would have believed them. But Adin Hill proved a lot of doubters wrong.
Every doubter wrong.
Yes. Can he still – is that the moment that clicked and he's going to be this guy from here on out? Or is he – I mean, I don't want to say – because it's not his fault he played on bad teams in Arizona and San Jose. But – when they traded for him about a year ago, I think people were like, oh, he's going to be the guy in Henderson because it's going to be Logan Thompson and Laurent Brossoit. Well, I think he certainly has the mindset to be that guy where he can be the guy he was in the playoffs, and the system is good for a guy like him, a goalie like him. The question with Logan Thompson, look, he hasn't played a full game since before the All-Star break last season. So is his confidence in his – and Lindsey, you'd probably be better to know more about this than me, but is the confidence in his body there? Is the confidence up here there? You know, that's a long time for a goalie to have not played 60 minutes. He's going to be here. He's going to be given every opportunity. The question is, can he earn himself more starts, or is he going to regress and become a backup? I don't know, but it's exciting because I think it's something we're talking about. Like, hey, there's two really good goalies here. There's a guy who won a Stanley Cup, and there's a guy who was an all-star who didn't even play a minute in the playoffs. So the only question I have about goalies, because, look, I think they're fine. I don't think there's going to be an issue with either one of them. But the question I have is, are you confident? Because behind those two guys is Jiri Patera and nobody who's ever seen a minute in the NHL.
Undefeated Jiri Patera, I'll have you know.
Yeah, he played late last year.
Yeah, but nobody else played behind Patera.
Yeah.
So you have two guys who had some significant injury time last year. If one of them gets injured and the other has to be the guy for, I don't know, say a 25-game stretch, you've got Jiri Patera. He's going to have to play. Are you confident in what's behind those two guys, where if there's an injury, you can bring Patera up and he can step in and play maybe 3 or 4 games in a stretch if you need him to?
Well, it's that time of the episode to throw the monkey wrench in, or probably more accurately, the panda wrench. Lindsey, did Kelly McCrimmon say anything about Robin Leonard today's?
He did. He addressed it right off the top, among other players that are starting the season. There's like a prospect that's banged up today. Daniil Marinoff is still recovering from his injury last year, and he said Robin Leonard is still in recovery from hip surgery, so he will start the year on LTIR. And so that at least kicks the can down to get some heat off the back. But I would be personally surprised if we saw him back with this team ever. Yeah. Ever. I just, as someone who played the position and his body and the way that he plays, I would just have a really hard time believing that anybody could come back after basically it'll be probably 1.5, 2 years off, with the amount of weight and pressure he puts on his joints, with how much he goes down, with how big he is. Even if you come back, it's almost like when Logan tried to push himself last year, like, oh, I'm back and I'm gone again. Like that's it. Just, I don't know how that would happen, but he's an NHL goalie. He probably knows some things. He probably knows some doctors better than I do. But based off of the people that I've talked to, there are no indications that he's anywhere close to being ready. And so Kelly just kind of kicks the can down the road there, but you got people. And so they should be all right, but it's still it's a lot of money. If you're on LTIR, obviously it doesn't count, but I'm not really sure how they're going to be able to manage that going forward. Say if he is able to meet a certain threshold, but we've seen them do those salary cap gymnastics one way. Why can't they do a backflip here?
So in year one, when Joe and I were doing this podcast and we were talking about things from a betting perspective, we sort of figured out what the Vegas flu was. And I'm not going to go on record to say that Joe and I were the very first people that may have coined that term, but we were certainly some of the very first people that found out that teams were coming into Vegas a day early and imbibing in our hospitality and then laying an egg when they played the Golden Knights in year one. Well, this is year 7, and there's a different thing that could potentially ail the Vegas Golden Knights, and that's a Stanley Cup hangover. It's an absolutely known thing. The team played late into June. The team drank gallons of beer and champagne and consumed unknown foods and unimaginable amounts of partying through the summer. How is Coach Cassidy going to minimize the effect of the Stanley Cup hangover? And with that, what do you think the expectation, or what do you think a decent, good record for the first 20 games of the season is? Chap, you lead this time.
Well, it's funny because it's not the first time this team has played late into the season. It's the first time they've played late into the season and won the ultimate prize. But I feel like this team is not going to have a hangover. And here's why. You've got Alex Pietrangelo, Alec Martinez, Chandler Stevenson, who have all, and now Ivan Barbashev as well, who've all won the cup before. I think we look at guys like Alec Martinez and Alex Pietrangelo as a pretty big part of the leadership group. Then you factor in the intensity and the leadership of Mark Stone. Mark Stone does not strike me as a guy who is like, okay, boys, we won one cup. It's all over now. Mark Stone strikes me as the kind of guy who will not be happy with just one Stanley Cup. Mark Stone strikes me as the kind of guy who wants to win the Stanley Cup for the next 5 seasons. I don't think he will allow this team to buy into the hype of having to repeat. I don't think he's going to allow this team to fall into the trap of, well, we won, it's all over now. Mark Stone holds people accountable, and he commands respect when he walks into that room. I feel like this team, as in the 23 guys who will be, part of this organization on October 10th, they respect Mark Stone enough to where they believe in him as a leader. And he's not going to allow this team to fall into any type of hangover. He doesn't strike me as the hangover type of guy. Like Mark Stone strikes me as the kind of guy where if he goes out and he has a bunch to drink on a Saturday night, he's in the rink or he's in the gym doing the work on Sunday morning. I feel like that's something that has resonated from the top all the way down to the bottom. We heard that 23 captains year one. This team doesn't have 23 captains, but there is a lot of leadership in that room, and there's a lot of guys who've won now multiple Stanley Cups who've been through it before. I don't think they fall into that trap. I really don't. I feel like they want to repeat. And to me, the quote of the summer was from Jack Eichel, where he basically talked about how good it felt to shut the critics up, to silence the doubters. I think Jack Eichel has developed into a more complete player, and I feel like he's a leader that maybe we don't really talk about enough as being a leader. I think he wants to prove the doubters wrong more. He's already won a cup before Connor, right? His entire career, all he heard was Connor McDavid this, Connor McDavid that. Sure, Connor goes out, has 150 points. Does any of that matter? Because he didn't win the Stanley Cup.
He also gets an extra month of golf.
Yeah, you see Connor McDavid doing his best Willem Dafoe impression in the media pictures that have been sent out. Like, he's angry. But Jack Eichel won the ultimate prize. And Jack Eichel is not going to settle for one. I don't think that this team is going to – there's so much veteran presence on this team that I don't think they fall into that. I feel like they come out – and look, maybe they lose the first night. It's highly plausible. The Kraken are sitting in that room, breaking sticks, watching this team raise a banner, wishing it was them. I don't care what happens opening night. It's the 19 games after that that ultimately matter to me more than that opening night. And I feel like this team's going to be really good out of the gate. The schedule is favorable out of the gate with a lot of home games. I think they're going to be fine. I really do.
So their 20-game record is?
I think they probably are somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 to 14 wins.
Okay. Lindsey, how are they going to cure the cup hangover?
It's definitely real. I don't care how much people want something. The legs feed the wolf, to quote the late great Herb Brooks in the movie Miracle. And there wasn't a whole lot of time to, get back on that horse this summer. I talked to Nick Hague briefly today about how long it took him to kind of get back new. And he's like, I didn't spend that much time away. Like, I was back at it in August 1st. I'm like, well, there's maintenance and there's getting better, right? There's two different things. And then also there's a conversation going on with Zach Whitecall with some of the reporters about his new emphasis. I mean, it's always been an emphasis of his career about being as efficient as possible, but like conserving your energy, and how he didn't want that mistaken for like where you're not trying to work hard or you're trying to save it for later. But there are different areas in which you manage yourself, just like how it is for the front office and how they manage this roster, like with your suggestion, Eddie, of maybe doing some rolling blackouts of certain defenders. And that I think would be really effective. But then there's the actual in play and how you approach it. Because like I said, there needs to be adjustment, and it might take a minute. Maybe the summer helped where you're not playoff hockey anymore, right? Like, you got to play that so you can play again tomorrow. And so how are they able to protect themselves? Because as much as hard as I can think, I'm protecting myself at all times. If I'm tired, I start making different decisions. When I'm tired, I don't go as low into my crouch, and I'm taking a hit, and all of a sudden I'm getting hit in a different spot that my body wasn't prepared for. Like, I'm genuinely interested to see just how many bang up injuries or like twist around injuries there are to start out the season. And sometimes injuries can work in your favor. I mean, Mark Stone had a ton of time off last year, and he said he was ready to play a whole season after the playoffs ended. And so you're at least getting him with probably a little bit of a different timing in terms of where he's at and his lungs and legs. And the motivation, I'm right there with you, Chap, about they have no reason to take anything for granted. I think the want to be that special team that repeats is very, very potent. I think people are still going to try to discredit this team's championship somehow, some way. And so there's always going to be that little brother.
Good. Give them the bulletin board material.
Exactly.
Tell them it's a fluke.
Exactly. And I was saying this last year. I'm like, I'm glad that they're underdogs this year, because I don't want people telling them how hot they are. I don't want all these expectations that are going to crush them. I want them to be not taken seriously. I want them to have to prove it to themselves each day that they are the team, and that they're a team that they are hoping to build in the image of last year's. 13 to 12 wins would be great. Anything floating above 500 is great for me, but they got off to such a hot start last year. I feel like anything different would be considered a disappointment, especially without the leaders in that room, but it's hard to replicate.
I'm going to take 13, 5, and 2 for the first 20. Quick question. One word answer. Who gets the A that Riley Smith left behind? Lindsey?
I hope it's Zach Whitecloud. I hope, but it might be a little early for him.
Chap?
That's my guess as well, Zach Whitecloud. I feel like you said one word answer, so Zach Whitecloud.
Well, that ends this topic because all 3 votes are for Zach Whitecloud.
Yeah, should really be a question.
No, and
I'm not going to give you some long drawn out diatribe, but I want to go back to something you guys touched on, the disrespect factor. It was real going into the playoffs last year. Mm-hmm. Everyone was talking about, and some guys would admit to it, some guys wouldn't, but everybody was talking about, oh my God, the Bruins, they're this record-setting team, and look at how good Linus Ullmark was, and look at how many wins and points, and they've got Patrice Bergeron, and then on the other side of that, you had, oh my God, well, look at how good Edmonton was down the stretch, ignoring the fact that Vegas was just as good as Edmonton down the stretch. And, oh, my God, Connor McDavid, is this the year he's finally going to win the Cup? Leon Draisaitl, he's in his own. And Evander Kane, look at the way this team is playing. The disrespect factor was real. And it's still there. Like, there's still idiots who doubt this franchise. And, look, I'm not the biggest homer, but I feel like you're doing a disservice to yourself as a fan if you're discounting how good this team is and how well built and constructed this franchise is, and the job that the organization has done building this team. You're doing a disservice to yourself. And I'm talking to you, fans in Canada, who constantly harp on the fact that Vegas isn't a hockey town. Baloney. Vegas is a major league sports city. They've embraced this team. I can't go anywhere in this town, whether it's the grocery store, Macy's,
Strip
anywhere.
club. Oh, sorry.
You said it.
Listen, you have girls at the Spearmint Rhino wearing Vegas Golden Knight thongs now.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Intense
no comment.
research.
Okay.
Yes.
Please continue. Sorry about that. I was just curious.
Informational purposes only. So, like, you have this city that has embraced this team, and it goes so much deeper than hockey for Vegas and the Golden Knights. It can't be explained in 3 minutes, but this team, this city is a hockey town. It's always been a hockey town, going back to the days of the Wranglers and the Thunder. Look, UNLV hockey does well, and they're a club team. They have fans that show up and support them. I get questions from listeners on the VGK Insider Show. Hey, when are you guys going to have UNLV hockey tickets? We want to go out to the games. So this is a hockey city. If you doubt that, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. And if you doubt this team, you're an idiot. And if you think that this team doesn't hear the noise that Edmonton was better, well, Connor McDavid is better than Jack Eichel, you're an idiot if you think that these guys aren't motivated by that. Because the quote was there from Jack Eichel. He shut up every single one of the haters and the doubters. And he was probably, even though he didn't win the Conn Smythe, he was probably the best player in the playoffs last season, not named Matthew Tkachuk.
And the singular reason that Marchessault won the Conn Smythe.
Right.
That's not a debatable point, right?
No, not debatable at all.
So I think that they should just embrace it. The Raiders are the evil empire. Instead of the Elvis thing, they should just get the biggest black Stetson that they can possibly find. And I think they do to a certain extent. They don't really show us that as much, but I think that they're aware that they're hated. And I think that that's a nice way they keep their tank pretty full, knowing that everyone thinks it was a fluke, or that the people are still bringing up the fact that George McPhee beat the NHL like a red-eared mule in the expansion draft 7 years ago.
Make your rules better.
None of that is relevant today.
No. Correct.
I like the idea of the Stetson, and you know what? They go up to Montana as a team every single year.
Yep.
That
to Whitefish.
What better place than to do some team bonding and find a big black Stetson than Montana? I mean, you can't make it up. You know, I may even suggest it but I can't take credit for it if they do it. But you talked about the evil empire. William Karlsson embraced that last year. He's a big Star Wars guy. He likes the idea of them being the bad guys. I mean, some of that even came out in his speech when they at the parade. So I think they behind the scenes, I think you're right. I think they do embrace that.
Hey, Tom,
I think they enjoy giving the finger to everybody.
And I know you have been here day fucking one.
Day fucking one.
Real quick, who gets more? So we think that Aiden Hill is going to get more starts than LT this year.
Yeah.
Who's going to have the better statistical year?
Who? I'll go Aiden just because he plays a little bit deeper, and so you're just less likely to give up the goals that LT has a little bit more propensity to do because he stretches himself out, relies on his athleticism.
I agree. I feel like Aiden maybe is a little bit of a better fit for Bruce Cassidy's system. I still like Logan Thompson, and I like the dynamic that they're two very different goalies. But I think Aiden will have not by a lot. I think they'll be pretty close, but I feel like Aiden will have the better numbers.
Well, that's a majority. Are they going to be in the top 10 for the Jennings combined goals against?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I think if you did that for the playoffs, I think I would definitely make that bet. But regular season's different, so I'm not sure how loose Bruce wants to turn the horses with this team if they want him scoring a ton of goals. And so
I think
they should, though.
I think they will be.
Yeah.
I think another year in Bruce Cassidy's system, and here's the reason, the other reason why I feel like they will be. I think their penalty kill is going to be a lot better this year than it was last year. So that's going to help.
Okay. Who's going to be the MVP of the team this year?
Jack Eichel.
Yeah,
Lindsey?
It almost has to be to just match whatever progression that he is supposed to be on right now. And you know what? It might not be a better offensive year, but that's not what I'm looking for from him. I'm looking for that 200-foot game. I'm looking for him to probably be more involved on the penalty kill. And so if you have a hand in multiple facets of this team and they find a way to succeed, I mean, that's the math.
Well, I think he was a point a game player last year. I feel like he's a point a game player again this year.
Well, again, we're not going to have much to argue about because I think it's also going to be Jack Eichel over or under 95 points.
Oh, way over.
And is he going to be the leading
How many
scorer?
wins is that?
I thought. Oh no. I thought you meant for the team.
No, for Eichel.
No. I don't think he goes over 95 points.
I
don't think
ESPN made the number at 93.
I don't think he needs to. I don't think he needs to be a 90-point guy.
Correct.
Over or under 95 points?
I'm
Lindsey
going
Brown.
under 95 points. Yeah.
I'll go under.
Okay. Is he going to be the leading scorer for the Golden Knights?
Ooh, I don't think so. I think he might be the leading point getter, but I think Marshy's going to have a big year. I think we'll see what Barbashev brings. He's got to temper it down too. He can't be playing. I'm eating nails for breakfast the way that he was in the playoffs. But I'm interested to see what kind of scoring touch he has. But like whoever's playing with Jack is going to get set up, and so that's just the way it is.
So Marshy for goals and Eichel for points.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah, that's where I lean too, because I feel like Eichel at the end, for as good of a player he is, he's an amazing distributor of the puck, and he's great at setting up. I mean, we saw it a lot in the playoffs, like how many times he set up Marcia. So I mean, yeah, I think Eichel's the leading points guy, but I feel like Marchessault is going to score 40 goals.
Yeah, he's going to have a big year. He's going to have a really big year. But if Eichel needs to be in the conversation for Selke, I'm not saying win it, but if he's not in the conversation for Selke as like a lead wide recognition, I think that he hasn't taken the step that he needed to, because the game recognizes game in that award.
Here's the amazing part about that. If Mark Stone is fully healthy, he absolutely could be in that conversation for Selke as well.
Except he plays the wing, and there's just that thing.
But
they love doing centers.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is, William Karlsson should have won the Selke the first season the team was around. So
they would never allow that. So
and Patrice Bergeron is no longer there to sweep it up.
Yeah,
that's true.
So there's that. All right,
no longer the Selke award; it's the Bergeron award.
We've come to the very last question of episode 54. It's hockey bitches. Anybody want to jump in the pool because the water's warm and call for a repeat?
Why not? I mean, like, if they're healthy by the time it rolls around, they got as good of chance as anyone. Like, I'm never going to be like, for sure, repeat in September, but because the game's just too hard. But to Kelly McCrimmon's point, like, they've done a lot better of a job retaining the core than other recent champions that look to go back-to-back. Like, Tampa had to let some people go. When Chicago was winning theirs every other year, it was basically a different roster with like 4 of the same players every other year, I should say. And so I think they got it great, but they got to make sure that they get their special teams figured out a little bit better so they don't have to be so reliant on 5v5.
Yeah, I'm not willing to jump through that hoop on fire saying that they're going to repeat, but I will say I don't see any reason, if they're healthy, I don't see any reason why they can't. I don't really feel like anybody in the West has improved themselves enough to knock the Golden Knights off their perch. I mean, Dallas is going to be really good again, but we're now in year 2 of Pete. generally the trajectory with Pete is he tends to peak very early and his teams regress back to the mean. It's not it's just the way it is with him for some reason.
Are you saying that Pete's a premature finisher?
Wow. Your words.
I mean, those are your words, not mine. But
I was just putting. He does.
LA is going to be there too.
LA is the sleeper team in the West.
Like I have no confidence in LA's goalies. So
I know, but trust the system. The system usually pumps them out okay. I feel like
they gave up. Look, they gave up a lot to get a guy who may not even want to be there. I mean,
he wants to be there.
He's forced his way out of 2 cities.
He's on the beach now. He's not in Winnipeg anymore. He
wants to be in Montreal. His head and his heart are in Montreal.
He doesn't play good enough to want to play in Montreal. He get eaten alive.
Like I said, they gave up Alex Iafallo, who was a Vegas Golden Knight assassin in his time in LA, and they gave up Gabe Vilardi, who were 2 pretty good scorers. So I don't know if they got better just by adding Pierre. They got the best player in the deal. Certainly,
they got more firepower. That's for sure.
Did they improve by adding him? I don't think so. So
and Edmonton still sucks. So I don't care.
The Golden Knights are superior to Edmonton 5-on-5. So look, I know I said they tend to peak early and go back. I really like Dallas because I feel like they've got the goalie who can get hot, and they've got the guys like Jason Robertson who and Miro Heiskanen and Ropey Hintz who could heat up as well. So
don't sleep on Nashville either. They might be there to break some hearts this year.
They stink. I won't.
They have Ryan O'Reilly now. They have Ryan O'Reilly, Ryan McDonough. They got UC Saros, who was almost a Vezina winner a couple years ago.
Nashville
the West
stinks.
always has a couple of teams that do that.
Playoffs.
Nashville sneaky. You mark my words.
I'm going to close this topic by simply reiterating what you started with: is there's really no reason that they can't. Yeah. If they get to day 1 of the postseason healthy, there's no reason whatsoever that they can't get to 16 wins. So that's going to wrap up episode 54. It's Hockey Bitches. Thanks for everybody. Well, thank you in advance for coming back. Hit the like and subscribe buttons that you see across the bottom of the screen there. We want to thank the Las Vegas Advisor. They're going to put our podcast up in front of their paywall for this entire season. We'd also to thank my good friend, Dr. John Pierce at Ageless Forever, who sponsors the podcast. And in upcoming episodes, we are really going to show you how red Lindsey Brown can get, because I've got some saucy commercials to cut starting in episode 55. That's agelessforever.net and my very good friend, John Pierce. Preseason starts in a couple of days. Training camp is in full swing. We're going to be coming to you every single week through the season. And we're also going to be providing you with a little bit of post-game reaction and post-game reports. We figure it's better not to read anymore, so we're just going to do some quick videos after the games.
I don't have the attention span, Eddie.
So we're gonna feed you plenty of video starting today. Thank you again. We really appreciate you coming by and spending some time with us, Chris and Lindsey. I'm honored to have both of you in the chair. We miss Joe, but this show will go on, and we'll get better doing it. Our thing together as we find our rhythm and knock the rust off, just like the players are knocking their rust off out at City National this afternoon. So that's a wrap. 54 is in the book. It's hockey season, bitches. We're out of here.